Hey Mike, why has nobody really ever found any Bigfoot bones ever?
Well, that's one of the most popular questions, of course. One of the first questions people ask are, well, if there's a Bigfoot here in North America, why haven't we found any bones? And what I usually tell them is, well, actually, I think we have found bones. The question is, the difference is that the bones haven't been found by the right people, and they haven't gotten into the right hands. That's what I think has occurred. For example, well, there's also natural reason, and I should touch on that first, just to put it aside. When an animal dies in the woods of natural causes, they will secret themselves away. They will find a cubby hole to kind of crawl into and back up into, so that they're out of the way, they're hidden somewhat, and they have a place where they're least apt to be bothered by predators and scavengers while they're dying. And then when they die, the nature, all the elements take over the scene, and scavengers come up and they'll start tearing the body apart. Rodents will run off with the bones and chew the bones. Other animals will come up, rats will come up and start eating. Coyotes, whatever. Opportunistic scavengers will come by, and in the process they will generally take the body parts and run off with them and scatter them around. If they don't, and they've experimented with this where they've staked down an animal like a deer with a time-lapse photo on it, camera, and they've proven that within 4 to 5 days an animal that dies in the woods will be completely gone, just from scavengers and insects, mammals, insects, all the various animals that will come and feed on the body. And it only takes about 4 to 5 days for that to happen. So the bones are not going to lay around very long in a normal situation. If an animal dies of an unnatural death, then you might be more likely to find the bones. Like you might find a dead cougar that was shot and ran away and then died later of a bullet wound, and you could theoretically stumble on its body like that. But something that's knows it's dying will usually hide, and then only the other animals will be able to find it. The other thing is, I think we have found bones, but there's a number of reasons why that hasn't been made clear to the public. First of all, I should also state that in Africa, Asia, and Indonesia, the places where paleontologists look for bones of this sort, they have found bones. There's plenty of examples of fossils from Africa, Asia, and Indonesia indicating hominids similar to ourselves, but different. And I would say that if any of those creatures, like Australopithecus or Meganthropus or Paranthropus, if they were still alive today and you saw one running through the woods, you would probably characterize it as a Bigfoot. So there are bones. The question is, where are the bones in North America? Well, first off, paleontologists don't look for those kinds of bones in North America. They look for dinosaur bones, and they look for, relict Homo sapien remains in, where there used to be cities and towns and things like that, and they will sometimes dig up graveyards. But when this country was being developed, after we took it away from the Indians and started moving west and laying out little towns and so forth, we were digging up graveyards left and right, and we were digging up burial mounds of the Indians. And from excerpts that I've read in old newspapers and in archives of these sorts of articles, apparently there were quite a few gigantic skeletons that were dug up when these bodies were exhumed, and the remains of the natives were transplanted to various. Some of them were transplanted to other burial sites in honoring, the ancestors of the various tribes on the reservations. But some of those bones also, I'm convinced, ended up, in cardboard boxes or whatever, or crates, labeled extra large Indian or something, and these were sequestered away in the basements of museums, early museums. And back when the museums were first being put together, the people who ran those museums were essentially racists, and I'll tell you why. We just had the Indian Wars. You don't go around annihilating and wiping out other human beings without, in your mind at least, reducing them to less than human. So we thought of the Indians as savages, and all of our educated people, talked down about them, put them down, and were essentially racists, and felt that the natives weren't worthy to own the land. And so we took it away, and it was a perfectly right thing to do because they were savages. So we don't want to, talk about how some of the Indians were really magnificently large, or that they had technology and they had metallurgy and things that we found in these burial mounds that made them pretty important people, maybe, and that maybe some of their ancestors would have even a higher culture than the present Indians, so they have a history that would be important. But no, we had racists that were running our museums at that time, and so that kind of stuff about the natives was shoved aside and ignored and pushed back. And so I think that that had something to do with all these giant skeletons being sequestered away. And I think it's quite likely that we do have bones in collections now that have just no one has ever looked at them with the right eye. And if there's people out digging up graves, generally they're not the most intelligent amongst us. They're usually the people with the least education. So I would think that a person who is a ditch digger by trade, or a grave digger or something, probably wouldn't know enough to look at two skeletons side by side and realize they were looking at two separate species. I would imagine that, most of us, without having been trained in anthropology and physical anthropology, could easily overlook differences like that and just assume, well, that guy had a bigger nose, or boy, he sure had a big face, but, not realize that they were separate species. So I think it's likely that we do have bones and the right people haven't looked at them yet. Another point that I might bring up right here is the fact that I think that the Bigfoot are probably sentient enough, self-aware enough, that they realize if they leave their dead laying around, then we're going to find them. And since they're apparently trying to hide from us and doing a fairly good job of it, that would be a good reason why they would bury their dead. And because we are right now in the Bigfoot community discussing stories that have been told by people who claim to have had long-term relationships with Bigfoot and Bigfoot families, we have a couple of stories now. The newest one via Autumn Williams, the previous one from Mary Green, having to do with burials by Bigfoot. Both these stories are told as tales of habituation, and they both claim that they witnessed the Bigfoot burying their dead. So if those stories are true, then that corroborates the theory that they bury their dead.